Fort Bragg, North Carolina, March 14, 1970, Saturday morning, 10:30. The sky over Fort Bragg is the color of old concrete, not dark enough to threaten rain, not light enough to promise sun, just overcast, the kind of sky that makes no promises and keeps none. A light wind moves across the training ground from the west, carrying with it the smell of cut grass and diesel fuel, and the particular institutional smell that large military bases have, a smell that has no single source but is made of 100 small sources: motor oil and canvas and boot polish and cafeteria food, and the cold metal of weapons kept clean and ready, combined into something that becomes, after enough time, simply the smell of the army. The temperature is in the mid-50s, cool but not uncomfortable, the kind of morning that is good for physical work. Fort Bragg is one of the largest military installations in the United States. More than 100,000 acres of North Carolina earth that the Army has claimed and shaped and built upon over decades into something that is its own kind of city. A city with one purpose, organized around one idea, populated by people who have chosen, or been chosen for, the specific and serious work of national defense. Home to the 82nd Airborne, home to Special Forces, home to Rangers and paratroopers, and the kinds of units whose full designations and specific functions are not discussed in the kind of detail that ends up in newspapers. Men who have been trained not merely to fight, but to fight in darkness, in jungle, in desert, in conditions that are designed to break the ordinary person before the mission even begins. This morning, 1,000 of them are standing in formation on the training ground. Perfect rows, perfect columns, uniform spacing between every man, measured not with instruments, but with the internalized precision of soldiers who have stood in enough formations that their bodies know the correct distance the way a musician knows the correct note, not by thinking about it, not by measuring, but by feel, by the accumulation of repetition into instinct. They are wearing standard fatigues, boots polished to a shine that the overcast morning cannot fully appreciate, but that exists anyway, because standards exist whether or not conditions are favorable for displaying them. Hats straight, hands clasped behind backs, feet shoulder-width apart, parade rest. The position that is not quite relaxed and not quite at attention. The position that says, we are ready, we are patient, we are here. They are not recruits. There is no recruit energy in this formation, no nervous fidgeting at the edges, no eyes cutting sideways to check what the man next to them is doing. These are active duty soldiers, men who have been through basic training and advanced training and, for many of them, things beyond training that training was only ever meant to prepare them for. Some of them have been to Vietnam. Some of them will go to Vietnam in the coming months. Some of them are between deployments, which is its own particular state of being, returned from something, waiting for something, existing in the interval with the knowledge that the interval will end. All of them are here because they were ordered to be here. That is not a small distinction. These are not enthusiasts. These are not people who read about this event in a program and decided to attend. They received an order and they followed it, the way soldiers follow orders, without editorial comment. And they formed up on this training ground on a Saturday morning in cool weather under a concrete sky, and they are standing at parade rest waiting for whatever is going to happen. At the far end of the field, a raised wooden platform stands 4 feet off the ground, 20 feet square, built specifically for today, temporary construction, functional, built to be visible and to carry sound. At each corner of the platform, a metal pole with a speaker mounted at the top, angled slightly downward toward the formation. At the center of the platform, a single microphone stand. Behind the platform, the base's buildings form a low horizon. Barracks, administrative offices, training facilities, all of them the same institutional architecture that says, this building exists to serve a function. The function is serious. Decoration would be a waste of resources that belong elsewhere. The platform is empty. Beside it, speaking quietly with 2 Army officers, is BruceLee. He arrived at Fort Bragg the previous evening. Driven onto the base through the main gate in a government vehicle, past the guard post and the flags and the signs that list the base's various directives and regulations in the plain declarative language of institutions that do not need to persuade anyone of anything because the authority to require compliance already exists. He was given quarters for the night, modest, functional, the Army's version of hospitality, which is to say, clean, sufficient, no more than sufficient. He slept, or did not sleep, in the way that people sometimes do not sleep the night before something they have been preparing for. The invitation came from the base commander, a general who, 6 months earlier, attended a martial arts exposition in California, attended not as an enthusiast, not as someone who trained, but as someone who was always looking, with the systematic attention of a career military man, for things that might be useful. He watched BruceLee's demonstration, he watched the interception, he watched the 1-inch power, he watched the way a 140-pound man made the question of size seem temporarily irrelevant, and he did not think, remarkable performance. He thought, what of this is applicable? He thought, what principles are in here that my men do not currently have? He thought, what does this man know about the human body and its capabilities that the Army's hand-to-hand combat curriculum has not yet incorporated? He made a call. The call led to more calls. The logistics were handled by people whose job is to handle logistics. And now it is Saturday morning at Fort Bragg, and BruceLee is standing beside a temporary wooden platform in a light wind, talking to 2 Army officers while 1,000 soldiers stand in perfect formation 50 yards away. He is wearing plain, dark training clothes, no insignia, no school colors. He looks, from a distance, like someone who showed up to work. One of the officers checks his watch, says something. BruceLee nods once. He walks to the platform and steps up onto it. He does not do it dramatically. He steps up onto it the way a person steps up onto a curb. One movement, complete, without announcement. He walks to the microphone. He looks out at the formation. 1,000 men in perfect rows looking back at him. For a moment, nothing happens. Then he speaks. I'm going to ask you to forget something this morning, just for the next hour. I'm going to ask you to forget what you think you know about how a fight works. His voice through the speakers carries across the field cleanly, not loud, not commanding in the performed military sense, but clear, the kind of voice that does not need to work hard to be heard. Not because what you know is wrong, but because what any of us knows is never the whole picture. A sergeant in the 4th row keeps his eyes forward and his expression neutral. He has been in the Army for 11 years. He has been to Korea. He went through hand-to-hand combat training at Fort Benning in 1961 and again as a refresher in 1965. And he is here because he was ordered to be here, and he has not yet decided what he thinks about a 140-pound civilian standing on a platform telling 1,000 soldiers to forget what they know about fighting. He is listening, though. That much is visible. They are all listening. The Army teaches you to fight. BruceLee continues. I know that. I've read the manuals. I've spoken with your instructors. The curriculum is serious. It is built on real principles. I'm not here to replace it. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because I think that's the question some of you have right now. Who is this person, and what does he think he's going to tell us? Something shifts, almost imperceptibly, in the formation. Not movement, they don't move, but something in the quality of the attention. He named the thing they were thinking. That changes the relationship between a speaker and an audience, always, when it is done accurately and without manipulation. It says, I can see you. And being seen, even in a formation of 1,000 people, even on a cool Saturday morning when you would rather be elsewhere, is not nothing. I'm here because your commanding general saw something 6 months ago that he thought was worth your time. I take that seriously, so I'm going to give you everything I have this morning. He steps back from the microphone slightly. I want to start with a question. Not a rhetorical question. An actual question that I want you to hold in your mind for the entire time we're here. The question is this: what is the difference between a trained fighter and an effective fighter? He lets it sit. The wind moves across the field. The speakers hum faintly. Training produces skill. Skill is real. Skill is necessary. Without training, you are simply a person who is willing to be violent, and willingness alone is not enough against someone who is trained. We all understand this. But here is what I have found. After years of training and years of teaching and years of actual fighting, and I mean actual fighting, not demonstration, not controlled sparring, but the kind where the outcome was not certain and the consequences were real. He pauses. Training, if it stops at skill, produces a fighter who is effective in the situations the training anticipated, and only those situations. Another pause. Longer this time. The situations that will actually kill you are the ones nobody anticipated. In the fourth row, the sergeant's expression has changed. Not dramatically, but something in the set of his jaw has shifted. He is still looking forward. He is thinking. BruceLee asks for a volunteer. He is specific about what he is looking for. Someone with hand-to-hand combat training, someone confident in that training, someone willing to commit to a real attack, not a demonstration attack, a real one. There is a brief pause, and then a hand goes up from somewhere in the middle of the formation. A soldier, 26, maybe 27, Staff Sergeant Stripes, the build of someone who has been doing physical training seriously since he was 17 years old. Not bulky, but dense, coiled. The kind of physical development that comes from years of functional effort rather than aesthetic effort. He walks forward from the formation with the even stride of someone who is not nervous and is not performing not being nervous. He is genuinely not nervous. They meet at the base of the platform. BruceLee shakes his hand, looks at him directly. There is a brief exchange, quiet, not picked up by the microphone, and then the soldier steps up onto the platform and they face each other. "Attack me," BruceLee says into the microphone. "The way you would actually attack someone, not a demonstration, not a controlled technique, the way you would do it if this was real." The soldier looks at him, assessing, measuring distance, measuring angle, measuring the slight man in dark training clothes standing 6 feet away on a wooden platform in front of 1,000 of his fellow soldiers. And then he moves. He is fast. He closes the distance with a speed that surprises some of the soldiers in the front rows who expected a slower, more deliberate movement. His right hand comes forward with the committed energy of someone who has thrown thousands of strikes and knows how to put weight behind them. What happens next takes less time than it takes to describe. BruceLee moves, not back, sideways and slightly forward, into the attack rather than away from it, occupying a position that the strike was not designed to reach. His left hand touches the soldier's forearm, not blocking it, not fighting it, just redirecting the vector of it by the minimum necessary degree, the way you redirect a stream of water with a finger rather than a dam. And his right hand is at the soldier's throat, not striking, just there, present. The notification of what could have happened. The whole thing occupies perhaps 0.8 of a second. The soldier stops completely. He is trained well enough to understand immediately what has occurred. He looks at the hand near his throat. He looks at BruceLee. He nods once, a small, specific nod, the nod of a professional acknowledging a professional, and steps back. The formation is very quiet. "He did everything right," BruceLee says into the microphone. "His technique was correct. His commitment was real. His speed was genuine. There was no mistake in what he did." He turns to face the formation fully. The problem was not his execution. The problem was that his attack occupied a straight line between his body and mine, and a straight line between 2 points has one position of maximum danger, the point of impact. If you are no longer at the point of impact when the impact arrives, the attack has spent itself on empty air. This is not a trick. This is geometry. and geometry does not care how strong you are. He spends the next several minutes talking about lines, about the difference between thinking in terms of force, my force against your force, and thinking in terms of position. Where am I in relation to where the danger is? He talks about it the way a person talks about something they have thought about for so long that it has become simple. The way complex things become simple after you have lived with them long enough, not because they lose their depth, but because you have found the plain language for them. The Army's hand-to-hand curriculum, he says, is built around force exchange. Deflect, counter, control. These are sound principles, they work. But they work best when you have comparable size, comparable strength, comparable training. When those variables are equal, technique becomes the deciding factor. But in the field, and I think the men in this formation know this better than I do, the variables are rarely equal. You will face someone larger, someone who has been eating better than you for 6 months, someone who is fighting on home ground that they know and you don't. Force exchange in those situations is a gamble. Position is not a gamble. Position is a choice you make before the exchange begins. He calls 2 more volunteers. They come forward, both experienced, both serious, both having watched what happened with the first volunteer and arrived at their own assessments of what they are walking into. He positions himself between them. He does not look at either of them directly. He stands in the open space between 2 trained soldiers with his hands loose at his sides, and he says, "Whenever you are ready." They coordinate with a glance and move simultaneously. What happens is difficult to follow at full speed. BruceLee moves toward one of them, into the attack, not away, uses that movement to change his angle to the second, and is standing 3 steps later with both soldiers in front of him, both slightly off their intended lines, neither of them having landed anything. The platform is 20 feet square, and he has used perhaps 12 feet of it. The formation breaks. Not dramatically, not shouting, not chaos, but the perfect stillness of 1,000 soldiers at parade rest gives way to the small movements of people who have just seen something that their bodies are responding to before their minds have fully processed it. Someone in the back says something. Someone else responds. A murmur moves through the formation like wind through a field. The sergeant in the 4th row has turned his head slightly. Just slightly. Enough. BruceLee sends both volunteers back with a handshake and faces the formation again. "I want to talk about something that is not physical," he says. "Something that I believe is more important than any technique I can show you today. And I'm going to say it plainly because I think that's the only way it lands." The murmur settles. The formation returns to its stillness. Most men, when a fight begins, stop thinking. He lets that sit for a long moment. Not because they are afraid, not because they are poorly trained, because the training they received filled them with responses. If this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. And responses are not thinking. Responses are programs. Programs run fast, and programs run reliably right up until the moment the situation is something the program was not written for. And then the program has no answer, and the man running the program has spent so much time running it that he has forgotten how to think independently of it. He begins to move as he speaks now, not demonstrating technique, just moving, the way a person moves when they are thinking out loud, when the body and the mind are running together. What I am suggesting is not the abandonment of training. Training is the foundation. Without it, you have nothing to think with. But training should produce a thinker, not a program. The highest level of any physical discipline, any martial art, any combat system, any athletic endeavor, is when the trained responses have been so thoroughly absorbed that they become available without effort, and the conscious mind is free to read the situation, to adapt, to make decisions that no training manual anticipated. "Water," he says. And some of the soldiers who have heard of him, who have read accounts of his demonstrations or spoken to people who attended them, recognize the word before he continues. Water takes the shape of whatever contains it. It does not insist on its own form. It does not say, I was a cup shape before, I will be a cup shape now. It is simply water, and it fills the available space, and it moves through whatever opening presents itself. He stops moving and faces the formation. I am not suggesting you become soft. Water is not soft. Water given sufficient force cuts through stone. I am suggesting you become adaptable. Because the enemy you will actually face is not the enemy the training anticipated. It is never the enemy the training anticipated. It is always something else, something new, something that requires you to be present in the moment rather than running a program from the past. He demonstrates for the next 30 minutes, technique after technique, but always explained in terms of principle rather than form. Not do this with your hand, but here is why this position is stronger than that position. Here is why this angle generates more force with less effort. Here is why the longest weapon reaches first, regardless of whether the weapon is a sword or a leg or an idea. He brings up 6 more volunteers over the course of the demonstration. Each one is treated with complete respect. Each exchange is used to illustrate a specific principle. He is hit twice, genuinely hit, not pulled strikes, actual contact, and both times he acknowledges it cleanly, without embarrassment, because contact is information and information is always useful, and there is nothing in a hit to be ashamed of. The sergeant from the 4th row is one of the 6 volunteers. He comes forward when called with the same even stride he had going back to his place in the formation. He is taller than BruceLee by 4 inches and heavier by 40 pounds. He has the weight advantage and the reach advantage and 11 years of Army training, and he is not, he has decided, going to be polite about this. He is not impolite. He is simply honest. He attacks the way he would actually attack someone, with full commitment, no theater. He does not land. What he feels instead is the strange sensation of having his own force redirected. Not stopped, not countered in the sense of force meeting force, but borrowed, turned, used against its own direction so gently that it is almost courteous. He ends up a step past BruceLee, his momentum carrying him forward while BruceLee is no longer in front of him. He turns around. BruceLee is standing 4 feet away with his hands open. You were strong, BruceLee says. I used that. The sergeant looks at him for a moment. Then he nods. The same small professional nod the first volunteer gave. He goes back to his place in the formation. With 5 minutes left, BruceLee stands at the microphone and speaks quietly. I want to say something to close, and it is not about technique. There are men in this formation who will be in situations, in the coming months and years, where everything they have been taught will be tested in ways that training could not fully prepare them for. I know this. You know this. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The field is completely quiet. The wind has dropped. Even the speakers have stopped their faint hum. What I hope you take from this morning, not the techniques, not the specific movements, but the underlying idea, is that your body is more capable than any system that has been built to describe it. The system is a map. The territory is larger than the map. Always. In every discipline. In every situation. Trust your training, and then trust yourself past your training. Because there will be a moment when the training runs out, and what remains is just you, your awareness, your adaptability, your willingness to be present in a situation that nobody anticipated, and in that moment, what matters is whether you are a program or a person. He steps back from the microphone. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your service. He stands there, plain dark clothes, no rank, no uniform, 140 pounds on a 4-foot platform in front of 1,000 soldiers on a cool Saturday morning in North Carolina. The formation holds for a moment, and then it breaks, not in disorder, but in the particular way that a formal military formation breaks when the formality has served its purpose, and what is left is simply people. Men turning to the men beside them, conversations starting. The sergeant from the 4th row standing where he is and looking at the platform with an expression that is not quite readable, but is clearly something. The base commander, standing to the left of the platform with his officers, makes a note in the small notebook he carries. He does not write down a technique, he writes down a principle. 3 words. He underlines them twice. The wind picks up again from the west. Diesel fuel and cut grass. The smell of Fort Bragg, which is the smell of purpose, of people organized around a serious idea, doing serious work in a serious world. The platform stands empty. The microphone stand at its center casts a thin shadow on the wooden boards. Somewhere across the base, a formation is drilling. The sound of boots on pavement, counted cadence, the rhythmic proof that training continues, that it always continues, that it does not stop because one morning something surprising happened on a field in March. It just continues, as it should.